Hello students. Now let us talk about greenhouse effect and global warming. That is also the result of pollution only itself, air pollution that has resulted in these two major phenomena which are occurring around us. Greenhouse effect is a simple effect which has kept the earth warm and habitable. If I'm saying that, that means that there is certain phenomena which is taking place due to which we are able to survive on earth, that gives earth a mean temperature of almost 15 degrees Celsius. Now, before we understand what is greenhouse effect, we need to know a little bit about our atmosphere. Supposedly, this is the earth. We have a blanket of atmosphere which is divided into 5 different layers, a blanket of atmosphere which is surrounding this earth. So this blanket is responsible for making the earth a habitable place where living organisms can survive. And if you remember, we did talk about that the temperature is the most important biotic component for survival of any organism. So it is the mean temperature of earth, 15 degrees Celsius, which is responsible for all the biotic diversity that we see around us. Had it not been this atmosphere which is not present around earth, it is presently present, but if it would not have been present, the temperature of earth would have been minus 20 degrees Celsius. Why now it happens? You need to understand that there are a few gases which are radiately active. That means they absorb the radiation which is dissipated by earth, which is given back by earth. Now, whenever I'm talking about radiation and heat, I am referring to infrared radiations. Now, supposedly, the solar insolation that falls on Earth, it is falling on Earth, it is heating the temperature in the daytime, it is heating the temperature of Earth and it is being radiated back. It is trapped by few gases like CO2, methane, nitrous oxide and few chlorofluorocarbons which are present in the blanket of atmosphere, and what they do is they store that heat for some time, then they dissipate it further, which is taken up by the other molecule which stores it and then dissipates it further, which would be taken up by the other molecule. Instead of giving it back directly, because of the presence of this atmospheric blanket, it is being stored and trapped. Now this trapping of heat is responsible for keeping the temperature intact for like around the average that we have, 15 degrees Celsius. Now what has happened over time due to our human activities is that the amount of these gases in the atmosphere has increased. First of all, let's take the example of CO2. Now, you know that by the burning of fossil fuels and industrialization advent, since that time, what has happened? The fuel burning has increased the carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere. At the same time, the lower layer of atmosphere, that happens to be troposphere, if it is more rich in these 4 gases, it traps entire energy that has to be radiated back in the form of infrared radiations, which leads to a global change of increased temperature. Now, one thing might come to your mind that we always say that everything on earth depends on plants, and plants in a way are producing their food by the presence of carbon dioxide. So yes, this question is very much valid, because we do have CO2 fertilization effect which comes into being whenever the content of CO2 increases, which means that the productivity of the plants increases whenever there is more amount of CO2. That means if we are adding CO2 into the atmosphere, that might not have much problem, because already the CO2 is always a limiting factor in photosynthesis. But the outcomes that come after this, that if you are increasing the fertilization effect, the CO2 is increasing the productivity of the plants. At the same time, it is bringing many climatic changes at geographical level which cannot be tackled, and the CO2 fertilization effect, how much better it is for the plants, it is going to be hazardous in some way or other. That means in long run, this increase in CO2 is not beneficiary. Then at the same time, this CH4, that is methane, that also increases the content of infrared radiation trapping, and it increases the temperature. Now all these things, they lead to a phenomena known as global warming, which you might hear now and again, that whatever weather changes are occurring, they are because of the global warming that is taking place. Now, you know, entire climatic changes on earth are somehow dependent on the major mass of Earth that is occupied by the oceans, and a slight change, even of 1 degree change in the temperature, can bring many climatic changes, because entire Earth's climate is dependent upon oceanic changes. So what are the possible effects of global warming which would directly affect us and other life forms is that there is a large scale effect on the weather and climate at various places. What happens is that the higher latitudes, that is towards the poles, they receive more of precipitation, while the lower latitudes, they are going to be devoid of precipitation, the earlier rates which naturally occur. So there are cases of droughts and floods. Rampant change in the atmosphere would somehow result in some or other sort of natural calamities that we face, that in the form of floods and droughts. Next is the sea level change. Sea level change is the condition, as you know, when global warming would occur, the temperature would rise, and our polar caps are all rich of huge ice sheets. They are so huge, they are many kilometers wide, square kilometers of ice is present. If the temperature rises, those ice sheets, they melt and they join the oceans. When they join the oceans, the sea level rises, and many famous cities of the world are coastal cities, so there is a possible chance of them getting submerged in the sea. Then there is another effect that is directly on the species which are present. We had discussed about niche specialization, that an organism takes a large amount of time in specializing itself, in developing a niche for itself over where it can survive, and it is dependent on the temperature. Now, if there is a temperature variation, you can very well realize that the specialization of the organism in that particular niche is going to be altered, and the species distribution is going to vary because of this temperature change. And last one is food production. Now, what has food production to do with global warming? I told you about CO2 fertilization effect, in which the plants are going to increase their productivity in terms of formation of glucose and uptake of carbon dioxide if the carbon dioxide is more. So we can realize that it is going to increase the food production. Global warming is going to result in increase in food production, which is a totally wrong perception. The food production is going to decline substantially. The reason being that CO2 fertilization effect is going to increase the uptake of carbon dioxide by weeds and other plants which are not as important as in the case of crop plants. So the food production would also decline. In the nutrient devoid soil, the plants would be able to take up their nutrients from mycorrhizal support. Nitrogen could be taken up and they would grow incessantly. So food production is also going to decline as a result of global warming. So we get to know that by increasing small amount of these few gases, which are result of fossil fuel burning and other industrial activities, how much ill effects that we are going to face on the global scale. That is all because of the pollutants which are being added into the atmosphere, and if they happen to be the greenhouse gases, they are going to increase the global temperature, and when the global temperature increases, you never know how many climatic changes one is going to face, and that these are the results that we'll have to face, if not now but at least in coming 50 years. These phenomena would be very common and we'll have to face them. So we need to make sure that the greenhouse emission of the gases is being controlled, and a lot of activity is being done at global level by various countries, that there are many conventions and conferences which are taking care so that the greenhouse gas emission from various industrial outputs is being reduced. Thank you.